I call the member for Blue Mountains.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. I stand today as a co-sponsor of the Voluntary Assisted Dying Bill 2021 to make a contribution to this significant reform to be. People's lives and death are powerful and personal, and that is the essence of this bill. So I share some of these with you all, people's lives and deaths, for the record today. Kim of Winmalee in the Blue Mountains wrote to me, "Today my 86-year-old grandfather drove his car into a river. He suffered kidney, bowel and renal failure. He hadn't been able to stand on his own for years and has slowly lost his dignity, but not his mind. He long lobbied for the right to choose his end. Please, please, please save another family this heartache. Please support this bill and allow people to die with dignity when they choose." And, Mr Speaker, from a Sydney Morning Herald article of November 2017, my friend Coralie's story. The tragedy occurred half a lifetime ago, but for Coralie Richmond, the memory remains acute. Called to her parents' home in the Blue Mountain suburb of Lawson by her distraught mother one day in 1981, Richmond found her father Jeffrey on the floor, bleeding. The 72-year-old had been enduring great pain as a consequence of asbestosis he had developed from exposure to the deadly fibres while building houses. That morning, the day after a doctor instructed him to take a series of x-rays to Westmead Hospital, Jeffrey put a shotgun to his temple and pulled the trigger. "I think," he said, "I am so ill. I am in so much pain, I have to do something about it," says Coralie about her father. "I had to ring the ambulance. Then I had to ring the police because a gun had been discharged," Coralie recalls. "The police asked, 'Is the gunman still around?' I told them, 'Look, it was my father. He's tried to take his own life.'" Coralie's father spent about a week in Westmead Hospital before he died. A Christian and member of the Salvation Army, Coralie Richmond is a long-time advocate for voluntary assisted dying laws, including legislation due for debate in the New South Wales Parliament next week. That was November 2017. She can't say for sure, but Coralie believes her father would have been likely to take a more peaceful path had such laws have been in place, avoiding the trauma experienced by her family and felt to this day. Allow me the indulgence of reiterating my plea of 2017 to the Parliament on a similar bill. This strikes at the heart of so many in our community, Mr Speaker. There is nothing more fundamental than a person's right to treatment, palliative care and support when dealing with the terminal or life-changing illness. A number of times previously in this place, I've spoken about the need for greater investment in palliative care services, particularly in rural and regional areas of this state, and that is something I remain committed to. However, it is easy for opponents of the Voluntary Assisted Dying Bill to see it as providing an alternative to skilled and well-funded palliative care, when this is so clearly not the case. This kind of polarising argument denies the fears, the needs and concerns of many people facing a terminal illness or suffering unbearable pain in the last months and weeks of their lives. I am saying that we need both well-funded and well-resourced palliative care, as well as other end-of-life options for people whose needs cannot be met by palliative care alone. What a voluntary assisted dying bill provides, Mr Speaker, is choice for those suffering unbearably with no hope of recovery to have access to a medically assisted, quick, peaceful and dignified death. And as has been well documented in countries and other Australian states where such legislation exists, a relatively small number of people will choose voluntary assisted dying. Yet this important legislation provides reassurance for those suffering that should it become too great, they can control when they wish to end their own lives, surrounded by those who love them. I acknowledge the personal struggles of people living with terminal illness and those involved in the care of the terminally ill, including family members and carers, palliative care doctors and nurses, non-government agencies and support services. It is currently illegal to assist people facing unbearable pain to end their suffering. This not only places dying people in an unenviable situation, but it also places their families and others involved in their care in the same situation. Should a dying person wish to end their pain and suffering, they may be forced to end their life prematurely and alone, so as not to legally implicate their loved ones. Surely, Mr. Speaker, surely other members, this is not the way that an advanced society such as ours should treat people at the end of their lives. I acknowledge that this legislation raises mixed emotions. However, I believe what must remain at the centre of this debate are the rights and the dignity of those who are dying. I assert that voluntary assisted dying is a dignified and reasonable choice for competent people to make when their medical condition results in untreatable and incurable suffering and pain. Further, when they have already lost more than we can imagine. Having this choice can be of great psychological benefit, Mr. Speaker. Even if they never take this option, knowing it is even possible can provide enormous relief. I hope and trust members have spent time educating themselves on this issue. Please listen to those who are directly affected. A very dear friend of mine, Maurice Brady, died in January 2017 after nearly 2 decades battling heart failure. End-stage heart failure is said to be one of the scenarios in which voluntary assisted dying should be available. In Maurice's case, this was not an option, and he struggled on until the end finally came, not complaining. I want to speak of Maurice today because of my dear friend and former staffer Susie and the help she has provided me in preparing today's speech. Blue Mountains advocate Anne Gabrielides suffered from motor neuron disease. With her husband Paul at her side, she sought my support for the legislation in 2017 to ensure end-of-life choices for terminally ill people, and Anne appealed to me. She said this, Mr. Speaker: "Of all people, Trish, you understand the importance of your voice, convincing, negotiating with and inspiring your audience. Similarly, my job up until a year ago was to convince, negotiate and inspire parents of deaf children so that they could teach their children how to listen, learn and realise their potential. Our voices, yours and mine, convey many years of learning and experience, and now mine has gone. My voice is not the only thing I've lost, but I'm not going to take your time or mine complaining about the things I have lost because they're gone and will never return. I have accepted the fact that this disease is going to win the war, but I will win some of the battles along the way. I want to win the last battle and die with dignity on my terms when I am good and ready." I attended the funeral of Anne Gabrielides in January 2018 with a number of members in this place. Not long after she said this to me, she didn't get her dying wish. Today, for Anne and her family, I honour her vibrant life rather than focus on her death. And I reiterate my plea: let's legislate for this reform. I turn briefly to some of the concerns and objections to voluntary assisted dying that people have raised with me. And for the sake of brevity, I will note those major concerns. Mr. Speaker, can I seek a short extension?
Seeks an extension of time. All those in favour say aye. Against say no. The ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Thank you. Some of these concerns include people's worries about coercion and elder abuse, and we have heard those arguments put in this place. People have raised concerns about safeguards and the stringent measures, whether they are enough. And people have raised concerns about the fact that palliative care could offer what is needed and that this bill is not. I think these issues have been, I believe, comprehensively and adequately addressed previously by a number of members, and I need not repeat them. But I do want to put on the record the many people, Mr. Speaker, who contacted my office and respectfully, diplomatically, with heart, put some of their concerns to me. And finally, this issue is not abstract for me. It's not just a bill. This is deeply personal. My nana, Jean, is almost 96 years old. She has always been a rock, actually a gem in my life. She has lived a long and fantastic life. I adore her stories of adventure, of love, of family, of travel. She suffers from many ailments now and she's tired. She lives alone and independently, with little home care help. Nana's mobility has decreased to the point that some days she can barely move. For someone who was agile and fit and sprightly and always fiercely independent, life is now difficult for her, and to see her like that. She is not long for this world. When we talked recently about her death, she quietly expressed a desire to go with dignity on her own terms, and she deserves this. My world will be turned upside down when she shuffles off this mortal coil, but I do not want her to endure hurt and anxiety anymore. I love you, Nana. I don't want to see you feel so vulnerable and suffering against your will. I want for you what you wish, to go gently and at a time of your choosing. And now I turn to a brief note of thanks to Alex Greenwich, the member for Sydney, who has doggedly pushed for this critical bill, his tireless and consultative and inclusive work. I'd like to thank Dying with Dignity, who've worked with me for many years in my community, particularly Shane Higson, Kiki Paul, Penny Hackett, Richard Mills, and all the remarkable volunteers we've seen yesterday, in the weeks and years preceding this day. I'd like to thank Go Gentle Australia, and I'd like to acknowledge in this place all the people's lives and deaths in this raw, real, powerful booklet entitled State of Suffering, Testimonies of the Damage Done in the Absence of a Voluntary Assisted Dying Law. I'd like to thank Andrew Denton and his important, informative podcasts. I'd like to thank the many beautiful people who work in palliative care. 90% of them said to me, we have to have this bill. And every person who made contact with me to express their heartfelt plea one way or another. When a person arrives at this stage in their life, when their bodies have failed them and they have lost control of everything, the least we can do is provide them with choice and control in deciding when enough is enough. Mr. Speaker, colleagues, on behalf of Anne Gabrielides, Morris Brady, on behalf of Coralie Richmond, on behalf of my old late warrior woman, Margaret Jones, and on behalf of my darling Nana, I call on this Parliament to support choice for people when they're dying. When death is imminent, choosing how to die is critical. I commend the bill to the House.
I thank the member for Blue Mountains. The question is that there's